Welcome, everyone, to this LinkedIn conversation with Delaware State University. They are the third college university to participate in the FICO Educational Challenge, and I'm pleased to be here with Dr. Derald Wentzien, Emily Breidegam, and Amir, Conwell, who are going to share their experiences working through the FICO Educational Challenge. Welcome, Delaware State University, to a conversation around your experiences with this challenge. And, it's been a pleasure for FICO to partner with Delaware State University, and I want to congratulate you on completing the challenge. And I want to dive into what those challenges were and experiences. But first, let me just recap for everyone what is the FICO Educational Challenge. So the FICO Educational Challenge is the first ever FICO college program that represents students with real-world data practitioner challenges that prepare students for careers in data science, particularly in the financial services industry, where firms are operationalizing AI, analytics, and machine learning. We started this challenge with Bowie State University and Alabama A&M University in the fall of 23, and Delaware State University is the third now university to complete this challenge. The challenge is focused on identifying and mitigating bias in data and subsequent models using historical lending data collected by the CFPB as part of the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. In this challenge, students get to explore real-life decisions and complex decisions around how to work with data to remove bias and make life-altering data science decisions about how they work with this data and ultimately produce models that would be responsible in its use and follow the concepts of responsible AI. The Delaware State University students had an opportunity to be mentored by myself and my team of data scientists throughout a semester-long challenge. We have two of those students here today, Emily Breidegam and Amir, Conwell, and I'm also joined by Dr. Wentzien, who has been mentoring the students throughout the challenge. So thank you so much for joining me today. All right, I'd like to start with a few questions first for you, Dr. Wentzien. Can you just help everyone with by describing your role at Delaware State University and what caused you to look at the FICO Educational Challenge as something that you wanted to participate in with your students?
Thank you. My name is Derald Wentzien. I am a visiting professor of business analytics at Delaware State University. I've been with Delaware State University about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked as a professor for 20 years at a small liberal arts college, which was later acquired by Delaware State University. So I was fortunate to get picked up. Prior to that, I worked as an analyst. So I have some practical experience with data analysis. I have some educational experiences now with data analysis. And I have to say, this was very easy. When you presented this opportunity to me, to Delaware State, and mostly to the students, I was like, this is a great opportunity. Throughout my years, I know that change happens. New technology emerges, computers get better, faster. There's different techniques for analyzing the data. This is a great opportunity to work for the students here at Delaware State University to actually work with data analysts who are actually doing data analysis to see what it's actually like, not in a textbook, but what do businesses really want their data analysts to do. This was very easy, and I know that our students benefited greatly from your mentorship, the mentorship of everybody involved at FICO. So for that, I'm very grateful, and it was a great opportunity for the students.
Well, it was great for us too, and we learn and from what the students are exposed to, but also how they approach the problems, right? And so it's a great thing for us also as we look at this complicated topic, right? This topic that we focused on in this challenge this year was around the concepts of bias in data and impacts to models in the real world. And we certainly didn't hold back, right? The data set was large and complicated and real, right? And I think, I think one of the things that we've heard from other students working through this challenge is, for many of them, it was the first time they got their hands on, real world data, which is, good, bad, and mostly ugly, right? In terms of, the quality and what's in there. And so, it'd be interesting to those that are listening in and trying to learn more about the experience that the students had at Delaware State University. How did they initially approach the data and the challenge? I mean, when we, shared this Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data with them and asked them to start making, really important and hard decisions about how to address and affect potential bias in the data set.
Yes, when the students first saw the data, first saw what you wanted them to do with the data, to look at the bias, all of the students understood the importance of bias, how bias occurs, that when loan applications are made, we want it to be made in a fair and equitable manner. It's very important that if you're going to create a model, it needs to be free of bias. They understood the concept completely. They understood how relevant it is and how important it is, but it was a new concept for them. Sort of our students experienced what you just mentioned about the other universities. When our students take courses, the data sets, the problems are very structured. In this case, they understood bias, but they're like, I don't know what bias actually looks like in a data set. Mm-hmm. They're also used to working with a problem and saying, okay, I know there's a right way to do this problem. There may be more than one, but there's a right way. I do A, then I do B, then I do C, and I get the answer. In this case, I think there was some hesitation for the students to actually start to do things because there was a fear. I don't want to make a mistake. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is correct. So the idea of, or the concept of trying something, recording what you did, looking back and say, did we get the results that we wanted? And if not, let's look back. What did we do? How did we get here? Maybe there's something that we could do differently. So the concept of constantly looking at the data and it's okay to try something and see if it works. If it doesn't, that's information. That didn't work. You need to go back and look. So there was a learning curve or a hesitation on exactly how to begin. They didn't want to make a mistake, but slowly they got there. And then they started working through, and your mentors helped them quite a bit in, getting them through that. So thank you to the mentors. For getting the students going.
Well, and absolutely, and frankly, you bring up a great point, right? One of the, one is around the way that we teach students and to make sure they understand concepts. But with these sort of problems we work with in data science, that there isn't a solution, right? There's an infinite number of solutions, and some are better than others, and that's a really unique concept, right? Particularly as you go through school to understand that. Well, actually, right, there isn't a right answer, right? There's lots of not good answers, but there isn't just one. And I think that takes some getting used to, right, in terms of that. But as you mentioned, right, keeping track of the decisions, seeing what worked, if not, backing it out and moving forward is really what, the way the world works around them. And it's a great experience, right? And especially to get over that fear of being wrong, because, in some sense, right, that's what we're trying to expose. We're trying to expose as many ideas as possible so that we all learn, as a community, how to address these or what sort of factors could be valuable to use the next time around as we make these models better. I think one of the things that I always find interesting here, and I just love it. We just today, right? We had a discussion of the presentations, right, and to see how the students, in different teams approach this problem, and so. Within the corpus here with Delaware State University, we broke the students into two groups, right? And for me, it's great to see just how they approached it, right? The teams, because there's so many different decisions and there is no right answer, right? There's lots of different paths you can take. I was curious just to see how different teams approach the problems, and what were some of your insights when you looked at the teams and how they approached your problems? What were similar or different about their experience working on this challenge?
Well, when I structured the teams, I was the one that assigned people to the teams. I tried hard to balance the teams. We had upperclassmen, participating in the challenge. We had underclassmen. I tried to group them together. We had different majors, different concentrations. I also took into consideration some students have taken other classes with other students. There was a comfort level. You're not learning how to work with new people, although that is a very important concept in business. You don't always get to choose your team. There are expertise you might need, somebody that you haven't worked with. So I was trying to balance. I tried to make the teams kind of evenly distributed with all of those in mind. And I did. I enjoyed watching them talk to each other and as they came up with ideas. But something that was challenging for the students and for us was some of the students were taking different classes. Mm-hmm. So trying to find a structured time or a good time for them all to meet was a little bit of a challenge at the beginning, but I think the students learned how to determine, okay, this is our time. This is the time during the week that we can get together and work on these problems. So I did my best to balance the teams, but it was very interesting to see how they worked together and started to create ideas.
Yeah, and frankly, one of the more interesting and particularly to this problem is, different insights are important, right? So if you have, students of different backgrounds, students of different, classes or different majors, right? It's actually a really great experience because when we try to focus on how to address bias in data, right? It's everybody works to involve a diverse group of people. And we do that primarily because, right, you can't see everything yourself, right? Everyone has their blinders and they haven't considered every possibility. And so that, the differences amongst the team's members, right, strengthens the team, right? And I think, from that perspective, I think it was also a great illustration of what we have to do within industry, right? If we're going to address this, we're going to bring lots of people around the table and we're going to have conversations and explore thoughts and enrich ourselves. So, I think that is probably really great for the students also to just see that, some of these problems require, lots of different perspectives, and the more perspectives means we get to that better solution ultimately. Looking back at this now, you've completed the challenge. What were the top 3 learnings of the program that you witnessed the students sort of kind of acquire through this through the challenge, Dr. Wentzien?
So not only was this a great opportunity and a good opportunity for the students, but it was a great opportunity for me that all colleges and universities want students to be retained, want students to graduate. But it's very important to me and the people here at Delaware State University that when our students graduate, that they have the skills and training that businesses are looking for. So I'm looking at it like, okay, I need to know what FICO's looking for when they hire a data analyst. What is current today? What are the skills that they need? That allowed me to look and say, okay, now that I see this problem, now that I see what they're asking the students to do, I can go back and look at my courses and say, maybe I need to discuss this concept of dirty data a little bit more. Maybe I need to discuss how to try something and look and see how it worked and make a decision. Did it work? Didn't it work? That's information. So that was one thing. For me to make sure that what we're teaching in the classroom is good, I wanted the students to know that it's okay to go out and ask. If there's something you don't know, talk to your teammate and say, I'm not quite sure what he's saying when they're telling me to do this. What do you think? Or I have this idea. What do you think of the idea? And just to be able to communicate and share your ideas with others. Colleges and universities, academic integrity is very important, but in the business world, you need people to work together. You're all on the same team. You're all on the same page. It's important. I'm trying to tell them it's okay to go out and seek help when you don't need something, or you just want to bounce something off of them, an idea off of them. And my last point is something that I guess I learned the hard way. Years ago, when I worked as an analyst, they gave me a project to work on, and I worked on the project. And then I soon realized, I should have written down exactly what I was doing, because a new person would come in and they would visit me in my office and say, okay, I need to get caught up. What did you work on? If I had a document where I documented everything that I was doing, all the changes that I made, it would have made it so much easier for a new person to come into the project. So I try to emphasize, make sure you keep a record of what it is that you're doing, because you'll look back and say, why did we change this number? Why did we take this variable out? It's helpful to have that documented, at least it was for me. So those are the top three things that I learned, probably more, but those are the top three.
Well, I love it, and particularly the last one, right? Because I'm all about auditable AI, because developing these models, right, and using AI is such a complicated exercise, right? And there's so many decisions, like you mentioned, right, where we made a decision to get rid of this, but why did we do that? And who made the decision? And how did we get to that decision? And would we revisit that, right? And if we're not recording all those decisions, then we're never going to find our way back down that path. Because as we discussed earlier, right, there's no one solution, right? And it's a path that we take. And I think it's a great observation. I think it's one of the critical pieces of us having this concept of auditable AI and being able to show how do we make the decisions, and who is involved in that decision making, and making sure we can get to the same path. Because if not, right, it's going to be very difficult to understand how we built those models, and moreover, it may be very difficult to improve how we do it in the future if we don't have the track record of what we did the first time, right? We don't want it to be a spin of the dice, right? The first time we got super, everything, all the stars aligned, we have a wonderful model, and the second time we've forgotten what that path looked like, and we're suboptimal, right? We should always work to improve. So those are great insights. And, one of the things that I also was just reflecting on as I got, the great pleasure of interacting with the students was, I just remember being in college thinking that people in industry were super scary, right? And I think just getting to work with mentors and seeing that they're human beings and work with them as peers, right? And get mentored is really empowering too, right? Just to see what does it look like behind those brick walls of an industry, right? And those, how do people work? And then, it's just as you mentioned, right? We work collaboratively, and we talk about what we know, what we don't know, where we make mistakes, and where we need to improve, right? And I think it makes it a very nice environment to continue to learn. Actually, it's one of the big tenets that I have here at FICO is that we continue to learn all the time. It's a lifelong education. But I appreciate everything you've done, Dr. Wentzien, to support us in this. I also, I think that the students came away really in a good position to pursue careers in data science as part of it. And so with that, maybe we'll turn our attentions to our students and hear from them and see if they have a similar perspective. So I'd like to, again, welcome Emily Breidegam and Amir Conwell. First of all, congratulations on completing the FICO Educational Challenge. And thank you for joining me in this conversation, right, to share your experiences with everyone that's listening in. Maybe I'll just start with, what was it like in the team? Like, so how did, you got broken into teams, right? And then all of a sudden you have to solve a problem. So can you explain how your teams decided to approach the data science challenge, right? As you self-organized around it. And maybe, Emily, maybe you can start by discussing how you all organized to start the challenge.
I think as a start, it was kind of like stepping on eggshells. We were all kind of not really familiar with something this sturdy and this big. Like Dr. Wentzien pointed out, like there is a lot of stuff in the textbook that is not like real world experiences. So it's all kind of set out, set in stone. It's very clean, thought through. There's a specific process and everything that you go through. But with this kind of project that's real world experience, a lot of us really didn't know how to approach it. So I think a lot of it was brainstorming, thinking about what we could do, what we knew we didn't want to do, and just possibilities on how to approach it. But a lot of us were scared at first, I would say. We didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And it was a really big like curveball thrown at us. So I think we all just tried to take it nice and slow, research a lot, and think about different ways that we could approach this.
Got it. Great. How about you, Amir? How about your team?
Yeah, so basically it was very similar. So for us, it was like we knew that we had to identify bias, get rid of bias from it, but at the same time, we don't want to skew the outcome of it. So it was like we all had different ways of doing it. We were trying to find the most common way. So at the start, it was like we all have different ideas. How can we put them together? And we slowly progressed with that.
Got it. Great. And frankly, yeah, there's no textbook to how to do it, right? And so you all have to self-organize. And fortunately, you all have the skills to do so. It's just around, aligning on that plan. So then I'm curious, right? So then you have the teams together. You understand who are your teammates, and what your relative strengths are. What your courses have been, right? And then you start diving into that data, right? And so I was kind of curious, Amir, what were the initial impressions of working with that data when you were kind of like taking your first steps around detecting bias and trying to, effectively figure out where bias exists, right? And then figure out what are you going to do about it, right? To maybe make a better model by removing data, fixing data, massaging data. I mean, what were the first major sort of steps there as you kind of had your first impressions working through the data?
Well, our first impressions was like, wow, because we never seen a data set this big or needed this much cleaning. We're used to working with like a data set with maybe 1,000 rows and columns, but this was over 500,000. So it was like a big difference from what we're used to working with. I would say to getting started, it was definitely slow. We definitely had to do more outside research because we really didn't know the exact point or how to start or where to start when it came to working with the bias. We knew it was how to identify it, but we didn't know how to get rid of it, how to work with it. So it was definitely at the beginning was overwhelming. Our first impression most was.
Got it. And Emily, for your team, was it also, or do you have different impressions?
I would say it was also overwhelming. I would also just say for our team that we noticed that there was so much of it. We're told that there could be bias in data sets like this one. And I think something at the top of our head just thought that it would maybe only be in one or two places. But the more that we explored the data, the more that we dug into it, looked at different variables, because it was so big, there were so many different attributes to columns, and there were so many different things that you could cross with and think about. And I think that we just noticed that bias could be anywhere, and it could be in so many different places. And it's not just one type of bias either. Like there's multiple different types that could be in multiple different places. So it really took a team effort to dig into each and every single one, what these specific biases were. Some we were familiar with, some we weren't. So what they were, what they're defined as, and how we could use code and different programs to research where they were at, how to get rid of them, how to use certain techniques and processes to try and eliminate them from the data set. Because all in all, if your data set has bias, your model's going to have bias. So that's obviously what you don't want. So we had to really tag team and kind of work at different aspects of different things with different bias and different attributes. So.
Got it. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. This data set, there was a lot of different ways that bias was expressed, and it wasn't like one way, right? And I think, I always treat every single data set as a biased data set and as one that is dirty. And I go into it with that viewpoint, and then I focus on building models such that I can go look at it, each thing that's learned in the model and whether or not it shows any level of bias. I think one of the more interesting things that I always struggle with, like with some data sets, is like, as you start to like remove bias or adjust the data, you start throwing away a lot of data, right? And all of a sudden you're not left with a lot. And so, that's always interesting to me, right? Like, how to build those models with data that is certainly less than perfect and biased, right? And, a lot of the art comes down to, trying to build models on data that are we limited as much of the bias as possible, such that the model is a better model, and moves us in the right direction. But I was curious, maybe for each of you, like maybe Emily, you can start, right? But what was the most interesting part for you in like exploring bias and trying to mitigate it? I mean, what was the thing that kind of stuck with you and the team in terms of like that process?
As far as me and the team, the thing that stuck with us the most is that there's no right answer per se, I guess. Something that we were trying to look for at first was some kind of logical answer on how to approach this problem, and there's not. So I think something that we learned throughout the semester and along the way was that you kind of just have to get thrown into it, and you just have to start doing things to figure out if they're right. So if you want to take out this variable, write down that you took it out, try and take it out and try and do something with it. And if it turns out that it was wrong, then you can backtrack and do it again. So I think it was just kind of like a trial and error type thing. There's no right answer. As long as you have some sort of explanation to back up your answer, then that's perfect. Then move on with that. If you have an explanation, you move on with that. If it's wrong, you backtrack. And I think that trial and error type method was something that me and the team really learned is going to be a crucial part of like our careers in data science and everything, is that there's not going to be some kind of equation or a logical answer that we're looking for. It's very trial and error, back and forth, do things, even if you don't know if they're for sure right, and try and see if they're right and figure it out. So.
Excellent. And Amir, how about yourself? The thing that kind of would be most sort of stuck with you and the team as you work through the problem?
So for our team, it was mostly the many ways that there is to attack bias. There are so many. And then also with that is like, we can't hit every point of bias with one certain way. So it's not like it's completely eliminating the bias. Is what's the best way to hit majority of it? So there's always going to be a little bit of bias left, and it's just finding the way to clean it the best way you can. And there's no, like you said earlier, there's like no correct way, but there's always like a better way that you could probably hit it.
Yeah, no, I love both of those insights. And, at FICO, we have this process called human in the loop modeling, right? And like, Emily, to your point, right? You make a decision, you write it down, and you make sure you can justify it, right? And how you made that decision, and that's a human process. It's not about throwing a machine or an algorithm at it, right? That's a lazy person's approach, right? And these are really important problems. So, making sure that we can write down and justify how we made a decision, that's human in the loop, right? That brings that artistic sort of flavor and insight of what is the most incredible sort of intelligence. It's not AI, it's all of our intelligence to make these decisions. So I love that. That's really important. And Amir, I love yours also, which is, I see this as, you both and your teams worked with this data, right? It was pretty gruesome in some sense, right? To work through. You build a better model. It's not perfect, but it moves us down the road, right? And I think the other major insight that you get to, Amir, is that there's not a perfect solution, and frankly, it might take evolutions of models year after year after year before we get to a more equitable and lower bias sort of outcome with these models. And that's one of the major reasons I'm most interested in working with many of the students at these universities in this challenge, is just because it's your generation that will start making these decisions that will evolve where data science needs to be. And it's an incredibly important time for you to be involved in it, right? Given how large AI is and how it surrounds us. And so I love the human in the loop, and I love the focus on that. It's evolutionary process. Maybe the last thing that I'll just comment on is this challenge was about sort of inclusion of more people in terms of looking at bias, looking into these sort of industry problems, right? I mean, FICO learns through every one of these interactions, and it allows us to think about our problems differently. As you saw, there's lots of ways to solve it, and it's not like we've thought about every little angle of it. And so, I appreciate that, and we all benefited very much from it. I was just curious. I mean, would you recommend this to other colleges and students to participate in? And would it advance your sort of views to maybe become data scientists in the future? Amir?
I would say yes, definitely, because it's like it opens your mind. There's so many different outcomes and things. It teaches you to like think outside the box, or there's no correct path. There's multiple paths. So doing something like this is definitely something I would recommend, just because it teaches you that you might not get it right the first time, but you'll just keep going back at it, and it'll get better and better more that you work on it.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Emily?
As far as recommending this project, I don't think I could recommend it to enough people in this sort of career path. Like I said, the textbooks and the professors at these universities are great, and they do a great job at explaining concepts. But something that is this real world altering is something that I can't recommend enough, because this throws us into something that we're not used to seeing at all. And it kind of forces us to look at things that you can't see in a textbook. So I think that this approach to it I can't recommend enough to other students that are looking for a career in data science, because it's so like life-changing and career-changing. And as far as like personally looking into a degree of data science, I love the fact of like being able to mold like a model into like, going the back and forth, trial and error, and just being able to create something that's like truly going to represent data and everything. So I love that aspect, and I thought that this project did a great job at doing it, and I would do it again. And so, yeah, I would definitely recommend it, and I definitely will pursue this career.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. All right, well, let's bring Dr. Wentzien back on, and this has been a great conversation, and it's been a great semester for us, and a big thrill to work with the students and to see them kind of blossom from, oh my goodness, this is scary and it's challenging, to how do we work together, to getting some really, really mature and deep insights from the project. You all just represented tremendously well throughout the challenge. And Dr. Wentzien, I again want to thank you for your mentorship and your support here. It's just been marvelous.
Thank you, and I wish to thank you and the students. The students, even though it was a strange concept at first, they stuck with it. They worked through it, and I admire the students. And I just can't thank FICO enough. As the students said, this is great opportunity. This is what they need to know. This is what it's like. They always ask the question, well, what am I going to do if I get hired as a data analyst or a data scientist? You're actually showing them, and they were working with actual data scientists and analysts saying, this is what we do. These are the types of problems that we work on. Great opportunity. I'm just very appreciative that FICO does this for the students, and as you said, the next generation, that they are the ones that are going to do the modeling and do good out there.
Nice, beautiful, and I appreciate that. And there's another challenge next year, and so I'm hopeful that Delaware State University will consider to join us again, and that won't be a fraud problem, which will be yet another really interesting data science problem. So I look forward to the partnership. I really enjoyed this one. And again, thank you to the students and the teams and yourself, Dr. Wentzien. Thank you so much.
Thank you.